Well, hello everyone. Hope everyone's having a wonderful day and welcome to another episode of Talking with Teal. I'm Ryan Nakade, and today I'm here with Max. So Max, how you doing, man?
Hey, good. Glad to be here.
Awesome, awesome. And I know you have some slides up here ready for us to see. And I wanted to start first by just having you share with us a little bit about your life and how you became interested in integral theory.
Yeah, okay. So, um, I became interested in integral theory through spirituality, through the spiritual circles. I learned about who Ken Wilber was um, after about 10 years ago. So yeah, I guess I'll just sort of recap over my what spirituality, what I mean by spirituality. So yeah, like right when I turned 18, I started having a lot of anxiety, and it was kind of like existential, and I didn't really know where it came from, and before that I had I guess went like growing up from like 14 to 18. Um, I you know, and that was like high school. I tried, like marijuana and like mushrooms, and marijuana didn't really change my like state that much. It was just sort of interesting. It was like pleasurable. But mushrooms, when I tried mushrooms, it I was like introduced to a new state of consciousness, and in a way, it was like all of my uh, all of my thoughts disappeared, and I was just present, and it sort of gave me perspective, and it showed me that hey, there's like these thoughts are sort of like a layer of abstraction over like reality, and so I came out of that experience at like when I was about 16, and it changed me because I was always looking for this like more connected, sort of richer experience. So by the time I turned 18, I started falling out of a relationship, and I got pain in my neck, and there's just all this anxiety, and I didn't know what it was about. I sort of just decided, I'm going to sit down and not do anything and see what happens. And the room sort of expanded like, it did when I was on mushrooms. And so I became interested in this idea that, well, maybe these states of consciousness are sort of real, that they're it's not just something that comes on from a drug, that it's more like part of these layers of abstractions fall away, and there's this deeper reality underneath. So I became interested in meditation. I read some various books, and weird ways they would sort of fall off the shelf, and the words would pop out, when I read them. And probably one of the most important books that I read was Eckhart Tolle, The Power of Now. And it was one of those books that it had an impact on me, and after which I had a couple of those higher state meditation experiences where the mind quiets down and the colors pop out of the things that I see and whatever. So then I started going to meditation groups, satsangs, and I started going to all these different spiritual teachers and looking for answers, trying to, because to me, the way that I interpreted it was that there's this one experience called enlightenment that, if you do enough meditation, you achieve this enlightenment experience, and then all of your problems sort of melt away, and there's just one thing called enlightenment, and that's it. So it took me a while to figure out that that's not really the case. But so in a way, like meditation was kind of like a way to escape my more uncomfortable feelings, and the things that I didn't like about the physical universe. And in a way, I thought, if I meditated enough, I could achieve a state of mind that would not it would be sort of like it would transcend the universe or whatever, so that, you know, it was like in a way it was an escape. So it sort of got even worse in a way. Like I started reading a book called A Course in Miracles, and A Course in Miracles is like a powerful text, and I guess I would still read it. I still have a lot of respect for the book, but I guess in a way I sort of interpreted it. I interpreted the writing as like, the world does not exist, only the mind is real. And you know, it says some of that within the book, but it was sort of like an extreme sort of version of, you know, where the meditation had brought me, that I was like almost trying to completely deny the physical universe. And by going like directly into this sort of spiritual mind experience and view. So that also led into a lot of problems, and eventually, you know, I started questioning. Well, maybe I don't need to deny the universe completely. And in a roundabout way, you know, I'd actually read Wilber before. Like, I've probably read 4 of his books or so, and like 10 years ago I read the first one, and I really liked it. But yeah, it wasn't until more recently when I read The Religion of Tomorrow, where, you know, his whole sort of view and theories sort of like made sense to me. And so with Integral, it's Ken Wilber in a way sort of allowed me to question the universe denying beliefs and be able to incorporate the physical universe into my spirituality through, like, you know, the 4 quadrants, which if for those who don't know, it's sort of like Wilber, we can get into this in a minute, but basically it allowed me to start being able to say, okay, well, maybe there's spirituality in matter as well. So I guess that's a pretty good sort of start, I think, just to sort of explain how I came into integral theory. And yeah, I guess last night I was sort of thinking about integral theory a lot, and thinking about what it is that Ken Wilber does. And so, but before I get into that, maybe we could talk a little bit about just sort of lay the groundwork for just my interpretation of like the theory itself, for maybe those who don't know what the theory is.
Sure. Yeah. Well, I'd like to pause for just a moment, just kind
Sure.
of recapitulate what you were saying. And it's very interesting, your story, because it sounds like you, as a spiritual seeker, kind of fallen into this state of like a solipsism or subjective idealism, in which really only the upper left quadrant exists at the expense of other key components of reality as are depicted in the 4 quadrants.
Exactly.
And integral theory helped you to balance that out.
It's sort of, yeah, there's like, he highlights like fundamental forces. It's like agape, and then do you remember the it's
Eros?
like Eros and agape. So like, yeah, it's like I was like on an Eros path. I was very like focused on Eros, and like the pathology of Eros is phobos, which is sort of fear of the lower. And that's exactly what happened with me. It was like I was too interested in the higher and denying the lower. So Ken Wilber does an excellent job at sort of showing opposites and how they sort of play out in the world. And it kind of showed how they were playing out in my mind, and that helped me sort of break out of that those sorts of ideas, I guess.
Yeah, really, really beautifully said. I think a lot of people can relate to that.
Mm.
So what did you want to get in here today?
Um, okay, let me think for a second. So yeah, I guess we can just, I guess I just kind of want to explain, um, I guess kind of just how I use integral theory maybe.
Sure.
And I guess I can just show the four quadrants here, because this is kind of how the first book that I read of him, he kind of just showed this and then some of the stages or whatever. And with with the newer book, The Religion of Tomorrow, it sort of weaves it all together a little bit more. But in a way, this isn't really novel, because um, like this is essentially just first, second, and third perspective. Uh, and you know, with Christianity, you have the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit. That's first, second, and third perspective. Like um, the Father being first person, and the Holy Spirit being uh,
Maybe
wait,
third person?
yeah, maybe the Father is second person, and the Son is first person, and the Holy Spirit is the third person. And in Buddhism, there's Buddha, Sangha, and Dharma. Buddha being first person, Sangha being second person, like community, and Dharma being like what you do, third person.
Hmm.
So, and then there's art, morals, and science. Art being first person, morals being second person, science being third person. So, and you know, these ideas, they're old, but what I like about what Ken Wilber does is he separates it into four quadrants instead of three, which is kind of it's nice. Um, so that's sort of like the the ground on which this whole theory sort of rests. It's like you can take anything and look at it from these four perspectives. Like it's as if everything has these four aspects, and aspects like, you know, like a diamond, you know, you, or like facets, you can turn it and you look at it at these different angles and you see different things. So with me, you know, I was able to see that, oh, well, I was only focusing on myself in the upper
Mm.
left, and I wasn't really paying any attention to my, you know, what I did, my body, the upper right, you know. Um, or yeah, and then the lower left to, you know, relationships. So the way that I see it now is it's like, it's sort of like, to me, I see like there's three spiritualities. There's like the subjective spirituality, meditation, relationship with, you know, the universe, and then there's relationship. And relationship is like everything. It's people. It's like how it's connecting with others. And then there's what you do, and what you do is the objective. And so there's these three aspects of the self, you know, subjective, collective, and objective. Yeah, and each one of these parts is important to pay attention to. Okay, so then Wilbur also, what he showed me was that states are that there's no like top thing called enlightenment, that it's sort of like we're just carried through these higher states of consciousness, and it probably goes on forever. um, and he's kind of nicely done is he's taken all these various teachings and sort of shown um, shown how there's an order to how these states might unfold. Like where I thought that there was just two states. There's just normal, and then there's enlightened. And instead, it's sort of, according to Wilbur, and you know, a lot of other people, it seems like there are higher and higher and higher and higher states. And so, yeah, that's been interesting to me. Yeah, I'm a little lost for words at the moment.
Yeah, yeah, no problem. So what you're showing right here in this picture is the Wilbur-Combs lattice, right, which
Yeah.
depicts how states of consciousness intersect with stages of consciousness, and that stages of consciousness and states of consciousness are two independent axes, right? So you can be at a magical stage of development and be in a causal state of consciousness, and having those two things teased out on different axes is very helpful. So I'm just curious, for you personally, how has this diagram right here been helpful for clarifying or enriching your own spiritual practice?
Well, basically, I kind of learned that like states are almost like it's almost like a drug in a way.
Hmm.
Like if you want to go into a really high state of consciousness, take some DMT. You know, you're going to have this experience that people might experience after doing, 100 years of meditation. The problem is, though, is that you interpret the experience from however, whatever interpretation model you're using, that's how you interpret the experience. And also, it's fleeting. So it comes and you experience it for a little while, the drug wears off, and you're no longer in that state. But, potentially it can have some lasting effects, like the mushrooms did for me. But I guess the problem with drugs is that you get introduced to these high, I mean, it's not always, drugs also can bring you into very low states of consciousness, but some of them, like mushrooms and DMT, ayahuasca, can bring you into these very high states of consciousness. And it's almost like you're experiencing, like, the fruits of what 100 years of meditation would give you, after not really earning it. Like, you haven't done the work. And so it's like when you come out of that experience, it can really destabilize you. So yeah, Wilber says there's states, and then there's state stages. So it's interesting that, people back in the day could be interpreting the world from a magic worldview, and then have like a non-dual flash experience, and then they come right back into the gross sort of state. It's just a flash experience. But then, as people develop and sort of mature, they can sort of carry themselves through these, and then they're sort of like regular state are these higher states of consciousness. And I think that's kind of what an enlightened person is. It's just somebody who's at a higher state than the person observing them, and they're able to sort of stay in that place. They don't keep coming back into the lower states of consciousness. So I found that helpful. It's just that it's more of a spectrum than it is like a dichotomy, like enlightened, non-enlightened. And it's more like there's higher and lower, and also flash experiences and lasting. And it's possible to mature and grow and experience those kinds of experiences all the time. I guess a problem can arise, if you become addicted to, chasing these experiences.
Mm.
And in a way, it's sort of like being addicted to drugs. You're looking for these, like, brain chemistry that's very pleasurable, and like, for me, it's like I think that the experience is going to like wash away and heal me completely, all the things that that are unsolved within me. I'm not sure that's really how it works, and Wilbur says that as well, with saying that there's waking up, there's growing up, there's showing up, and then there's cleaning up. So yeah, so anyways, just kind of reel it back in. Wilbur has sort of made this framework. And you could call it a scaffolding, like for sort of being able to navigate a little bit better through for growth, and the whole thing is for growth. And some of the questions that I've recently been asking is like, what is growth? And can people actually grow? I mean, over time, we've come from being hunter-gatherers, and now we're, shooting rockets into space. Are we happier than we were then? I mean, in a lot of ways, life is easier, but have we really grown? I mean, have we really? What's the point of all of this? Like change? The point is to grow. Well, I don't know. It's kind of an interesting question to ask. Is, well, what is growth? And Ken Wilber sort of says, well, you can grow through states and stages, and it's an interesting idea. But
yeah. So this is just my question, which I think would be interesting. And let's just pretend that I'm asking you this question as a person who knows nothing about integral theory. And I just heard your presentation laid out before us, and this is the question I would like to ask. Let's say that I'm at a super integral stage of development, but I'm only at a growth state of consciousness. So the question is, why pursue states of consciousness at all? Why not just go all the way in development and get to the highest stage of development? Why pursue these horizontal states on the grid in the first place?
I think a state can add in like a new dimensions like that were previously not available. And this is just me guessing, but it's like, it's like somebody, it's like that Flatland book, where there's all these shapes, two-dimensional shapes interacting with each other. They only see lines, but then they come in contact with a three-dimensional shape, and the line is expanding, it's disappearing, it's showing up as two, it's doing all these weird things. And the three-dimensional shape takes one of the two-dimensional shapes, and it's able to sort of see everything from a whole another perspective. There's no possible way that a two-dimensional shape could know that without experiencing it from the three-dimensional realm. So it's like you have to be carried through the experiences to be introduced to new dimensions that are also present. So I don't know if that makes sense, but
yeah, I love that analogy. That's not one I've ever thought about before. And so the other question I guess I would have is, let's say that you go to a deeper or higher state of consciousness, and that's analogous to moving from a two-dimensional space to a three-dimensional space. What value or good would it do to have a three-dimensional perspective instead of a two-dimensional? Like, how would that enhance your life?
I don't know. I mean, just to take it back to the Flatland, the Flatland analogy, perhaps, the square that has seen a cube, comes back and now has this new perspective, and now can say, well, maybe everything isn't the way that you say it is. Maybe, there's new possibilities. So it's sort of like it opens up new possible channels that wouldn't have been able to been conceived from without having that experience. That's my best guess.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. The other question I would have is, you had touched on that some of these intense and powerful state experiences can be sometimes kind of destabilizing, or even a little just
Absolutely.
crazy, right? And it's like, and it could be a challenge or definitely some hard work in integrating it, making sense out of it. Of course, as you mentioned, the way that you interpret the state experience is dependent very much on the stage that you're living at. So what kind of guidelines should we have in pursuing these states, whether it be through psychedelics and entheogens, or either through or intense meditative practices? Like, how do we get the benefit of that without being overwhelmed or pursuing
Yeah.
it like
Destabilizing
a yeah,
oneself.
that without it being destabilizing or like a drug addict or something?
Yeah. I wouldn't recommend psychedelics actually.
Hmm.
Like, yeah, I mean, that happened to be my path, but it's, I think the slow and the steady path is also very valuable. And so, I would say that it's important for somebody to be clean, like the cleaning up part. It's like we don't want shadows. We don't want to be we don't want to be going into these higher states for the wrong reasons. We don't want to be going into them in order to avoid something. We just want to be like in love with life, and that love is the sort of force that carries us into these higher states. It's not like we're using it to run away from something. And then once we get into these higher states, we can't be attached to them either, because we might come back down. So it's really about, like, I think I see it's more about just falling in love with every single moment that we have, and the more that vibration sort of picks up, it's like the brain waves change, and reality is perceived from, you know in new ways, non-local, and you know non-Newtonian. uh,
Right.
yeah.
And you had mentioned the shadow work and cleaning up. Can you explain a little bit about what that is and how that fits into this diagram of what we're talking about?
Yeah, well, I can just explain, from my own personal experience, but
Sure.
for me, I can say that part of my path has been in accepting my own. It's I think it's very personal for every single person, but we all have these, like, attachment. Ken Wilber says addictions and allergies. So it's like, I notice with myself that there are these, like, certain situations that I will be in where I experience a lot of just fear, and it's like the fear comes from, you know, being afraid that somebody will perceive me as certain. It's almost like I'm afraid I'm going to get found out, like somebody's going to
Hmm.
know, that something, and this fear just operates unconsciously, and I'm sort of, slave to its will, until I start questioning it. And I have to question it by facing those fears, by putting myself in the situations that, you know, I would normally avoid, in order to sort of expand my domain. It's like, well, no, I don't have to, work this job. I could do something else, or whatever. For me, it's about, relationship and who I connect with. And there are just weird things that happen where we sort of, like, deny ourselves those experiences, that will provide healing and growth, just completely unconsciously. And sometimes, moving into those territories is just, it's so hard. I mean, so sometimes some people are blessed with having very little shadow, but I think a lot of us have these weird attachments and allergies all over the place. So it's sort of a process of making sure we're rooting out these weird addictions. So we're not trying to escape reality. We're not trying to escape, you know, higher states of mind. We're not trying to escape, um, you know, being a body. So I think shadow work is really about learning to accept the self, and coming, and being able to be available to like our magnitude, our the magnitude of ourselves. In a way, it's kind of like we're all afraid of how much love we can really give, and we're afraid of how much we can actually do. We're afraid of our power. And it sort of turns it around, and it says we're afraid of being small, but it's not really how it works, I don't think.
Hmm. Yeah, so it seems like one of the themes that you're touching on that's very important to you is this aspect of confronting yourself so you can really live fully and be fully present in the most whole sense of the word.
Yeah, and authentic,
Mm.
being able to just speak the truth, and not trying to hide in, not trying to hide away from it, but it's just, the truth shall set you free. It's like that's that phrase, and it's very true.
Yeah. Right. Beautifully. So, well, I didn't want to. Was there another slide you wanted to get to, or something else you
Well,
wanted to talk about?
that was, yeah, I guess there's no more slides, so I can just stop this. But yeah, I guess yeah, I was thinking last night, what is it that Wilbur does?
Hmm.
Is all this stuff real? Are there really four quadrants? Are there really like cascading states of consciousness?
Hmm.
And it's hard to say, that
Hmm.
it's almost like what he does is it's like he provides a philosophical model. And I was really thinking about this last night, and to me it's almost like um, that's the same thing as what a religion does. Like a religion provides a sort of scaffolding to carry you into higher states of being, in a way. Um, and so it's like, is this real? I mean, not really. So what is it then? And I was thinking that in a way, like integral theory is almost like a protocol. It's like with integral theory, you can get very precise with specific things that you want to talk about. Wilder calls it a cosmic address. And the word cosmic is interesting because it's like, in a way, it's like, yeah, cosmic is sort of a dual meaning. It's like there's like the cosmos, but then there's also like you know, um, the mystic. So it's sort of like integral theory to me is almost like a protocol that could be used in order to talk about things, and it's very, very useful for it can be very useful in a lot of ways. Like it was useful to me in understanding my spirituality. It's incredibly useful for understanding politics.
Hmm.
um, yeah, like I mean it's like ridiculously uh, useful in that sense. Um, but is it real? I mean, I don't know. I to me, it's hard to say. I mean, there's so much like complexity, like types and lines, and it's like once you really introduce all the complexity, it's almost like the model disappears completely. So it's like this this experience is really it. This is just like a layer over that you can use to sort of like you can use like a toy or like a tool, like a telescope or like a magnifying glass to to observe whatever you're looking at from all these various aspects. And I think it's an incredibly useful tool. So that's my that's kind of how I understand what integral theory is. It's almost like a theoretical it's like it's a tool. but I wouldn't say that it's like, that it's real in the sense that like a biologist studies monkeys, he watches them, he writes down what they're doing. This is almost like mathematics, where it's like it's purely theoretical. So, I mean, does mathematics exist? I mean, in a sense, it like it's mathematics is also just a tool for describing the universe, just like language is. But ultimately, the universe, it can't really, all of it can't be described. So, um,
So is what I'm hearing kind of like how Ken says the map's not the territory? Is that what you're getting at?
yeah, yeah. But also, like, yeah, I mean, it's just, I find it like it can be dangerous if you use a model to interpret everything, because like, I mean,
Hmm.
yeah, I mean, like, it's like a tool, It's like you don't look at the whole world through a telescope. You use it when you need it, and then you put it down. And you do other things. But so I see the theory as like a tool and a protocol. Like, politicians could use it to talk about things very precisely. Where normally they're just talking through emotions and they're not really. I mean, maybe some sort of meaning is being transferred in that way, but so I don't know. I guess I think that I have a lot of respect for integral theory, but I don't really know. I'm not convinced that it exists in the sense that, you know um, that like that it's just, I'm sorry, here, where a scientist like studies something and writes down what it does. A plumber plugs in pipes. This it doesn't. I don't know if it's real. It's just, that's sort of what I'm saying, but I do see that it's useful. So
Yeah, it's funny because I was thinking about the exact same thing last night myself.
really.
More strongly, like almost like a sense of like doubt that was more strong than has ever been present. So it's kind of synchronistic that we're here talking about this the day after.
Mm,
And I guess there's several ways you can look at it, right? It's kind of like the metaphor of if you have a hammer, everything looks like a nail.
yeah,
I think integral theory is the most sophisticated, nuanced, and all-encompassing hammer I've ever encountered as a mental framework.
yeah,
But it's still a hammer, right?
yeah.
Like it's still a hammer, and are what you're getting at, that this can be almost like a limitation, like at a certain point maybe you have to discard the model. Is that kind of what you're getting at, or?
I'm seeing that. I like last night I was just thinking like about Wilbur, and I was like, what is it that he does, And it's almost like he's an artist. He's like, and then I just had that idea that Ken Wilber is making a religion.
Yeah.
And I mean, a religion can be a beautiful thing, though. I mean, it has like, religion has a lot of horrible connotations because of, all the things that have happened. But, you know, when Joe Rogan was talking with Robert Sapolsky, I think that's his name, Robert, uh, who studies orangutans, and he's an evolutionary biologist. Um, they were talking about, they ended up talking about religion, and Joe Rogan just quickly said, oh, so like religion can be, oh, they were talking about how the brain, like one of the prefrontal cortex, the 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 one thing about the prefrontal cortex is that you can prolong, um, gratification, and that's also one of the highest predictors of success in children.
Hmm.
And it's the marshmallow experiment, where they watch how long a child can resist the urge to get one marshmallow to get two after the experiment, right? Or after X amount of minutes or whatever. And that is a predictor for success. And that's exactly what the prefrontal cortex does. It allows people to prolong, the urge to just satisfy something right away. And Joe Rogan said, oh, well, like, and then they were talking, Sapolsky was saying, well, yeah, I mean, like, humans have this ability to sort of even prolong the urge to do something in this lifetime. They could say, oh, well, we'll get it in the next lifetime, or we'll get it once we go to heaven. And Joe Rogan said, whoa, so like religion can be like a scaffolding that can allow people to sort of work on the ability to prolong urges. And in a sense, in a way, that's kind of like, that's evolutionary in a way. Do you know what I'm saying here?
Yes, I think I do.
I'm not saying it very well, but
well, I think about it in integral terms. I think a lot of people associate that with amber or the blue stage of development, and you start to have this ability to restrain, usually out of feeling guilty, right? Whether it's Confucianism in China or Christianity or other Judeo-Christian religions in the West, where it forces you to restrain your red impulsiveness for something later,
something higher.
So it is a very important developmental stepping stone.
Yeah, and in a way that perhaps that had some sort of influence on how the brain evolved. I mean, like over a short period of time. Mm-hmm. And so I think religions can have like some weird evolutionary benefits, like there's data to show that people that go to church I don't know the studies precisely, but I have heard that, people that are religious, maybe they have all of these other benefits, So I'm not saying that religions are all bad, but, I think religions are also something that can be useful. You can use them. I mean, that's generally not how they're used. They're usually people use them for their whole lives or whatever. But so I just wanted to sort of separate, integral theory from reality. Like reality is that this is just a model of reality, and just to sort of maybe caution people from going too like deep into it or like trying to get too much out of it. It's like it's a tool that can be used, and it can be incredibly useful. But I don't think that it's reality.
Yeah, I mean that's really an excellent point. I think that's an excellent concern, and something everyone should be mindful of. And as you were talking about some of the drawbacks of religion, and one of my questions, because I can very much easily see what you're saying, and I agree with a lot of it. I mean, it's to me, all of your concerns are all of the concerns I have too. Mm-hmm. And the question I think about a lot is, as you're mentioning, religion has a lot of benefits, like the community, the solidarity, having this a spiritual way of expressing your ultimate concerns.
It could encourage people to use their prefrontal cortex more.
Yeah. Exactly, activating that and being able to plan for the future in a certain sense.
Yeah.
And of course, we don't need to go into all the drawbacks because that's pretty obvious. But the question for me is how to capture, right, the best of religion, how to capture all of the positive qualities, and how to get rid of all of the bad ones. And I think in some ways that can be kind of hard to do. Right?
Well, that's essentially the task of living. I mean, that's of course what we're trying to do. We're trying to live to the best of our ability. We're trying to have the most pleasurable, powerful experience of life that we can. The kind of experience where we have loving relationships, we meet as many people, we see beautiful things. That's sort of the task of life, and we're all trying that anyways. So the question is, is it useful? Is it useful to carry you into this? But I think it's important to recognize that it's a tool and it's not the thing itself.
Yeah, I completely agree. I guess the question is, how do you know when you've gone too far? Like, how do you know when you've conflated the tool with reality? Like, what are the warning signs or red flags someone can be aware of?
I don't know. I mean, I, life will kick you in the ass. Well, you know, it will kick you in the ass when you're, and it will get your attention somehow. I mean, it did with me being too into, you know, the subjective, you know. So I don't know. I'm not sure, but I think it's always important to just have some sort of level of distance and caution and sort of, I don't know. I'm not sure how to describe. I think you intuit what I'm saying, but
Hmm.
I might not be saying it very well.
Yeah, but I really appreciate you even broaching the concern because I think it's a very, exactly what you're saying is very healthy. It's indicative that we have a healthy relationship towards integral theory so that it does not become a fundamentalist religion.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, I can speak personally, like I fall into that trap a few times. I know some people I would consider more or less falling into that trap. And I think Ken has done his best to try to warn against that. And I appreciate how he emphasizes that the map's not the territory, right? But even if you explicitly say that, it can still be easy to fall into that trap because we're human beings.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So you've had this insight, right? You've had this realization, and you were thinking about this a lot last night. So I guess the question is like, what is next for you on your integral journey? How will you be? Does this change fundamentally the way you think about it, or your relationship to it? Or yeah, tell us about that.
No, not at all. I mean, to me, it's a tool, and I think that's kind of a healthy way to use it. Um, you know, it's a tool that I use to sort of bring about higher experiences in my relationships and in my objective life. Um, and it's also a tool that I can use to interpret my subjective experiences. Um, but yeah, I mean, with me, the goal remains the same. You know, it's just to sort of, I mean, it comes back to, you know, what is growth? You know, how do we grow? I don't think any model can really say what that is. You know, I mean, I have an idea about what it means for me, but I don't think that's the same thing as what it is for anybody else, really. I mean, to me, it's like, you know, there are things that I want to achieve in this life, you know, that um, I don't think, I don't know, I just feel like I just know what I need to do. Uh, so I guess the next step is just to really continue growing as a human being and trying to give to the community and try to do good things. You know, that's what I'm trying to do, and have
Yeah.
higher states of consciousness and be connected to this world more and more.
Yeah, beautifully said. You know, you really paint a very holistic picture of what it means to grow and to be alive and to be on this journey of development, whatever the hell that really means.
Yeah, it's hard to know. I mean, the truth is we all don't know, you know,
Hmm.
and this experience of life is just there's so much complexity in everything, in the molecule, in an atom, in a relationship. It's like we really have no idea what's going on. So I think there's some part of ourselves that we have to listen to our own inner guidance, you know, and figure it out for ourselves, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. And what I'm also getting from what you're saying is having this attitude of openness and humility, right? Because life is so complex, and we're always going to come upon things or across things that are out of our comprehension or that really shake us up. And we just have to have an open heart and open mind to embrace whatever life throws at us.
Absolutely, and be able to, you know, try to adapt to the next challenge. And you know, if it happens to be that integral theory is a tool that is helpful in addressing that challenge, by all means, but
Mm.
so yeah, that's kind of where I come from, I guess.
Yeah, yeah, that's awesome. So another thing I just wanted to get back to, you had mentioned a few times kind of like serving in the community and showing up in those relationships. And I'm thinking kind of your, quadrants, this is kind of your lower left quadrant practice or life. So can you speak a little bit about that? Like what kind of lower left quadrant or relationship practices or attitudes do you have in
uh,
working with that area of life?
I mean, it's really like infinite, I mean, just how I interact with my mom or like my brother, the conversation that I have on the phone. Am I fully present? Also, like there's, I would probably, it's more with the Dharma, but it's like, I want to be available for every single relationship that I come across. And that's a spiritual practice in itself,
Mm.
like how present can I be? How much of the infinite can I see in the person that's in front of me? Like, how how can I serve this person? How can I grow from this relationship? It's just always, there's always something there. And then there's always underneath it, there's like yeah, well, I want to be doing my own, I want to do this. I want to, I don't have time. I'm more focused on, I think it's just, we all have probably a different way of relating, but for me, it's kind of the challenge is like, just being present and available and open-hearted and um, vulnerable.
Mm. That's the key word for me is vulnerability.
Yeah.
Yeah, being vulnerable. That's a huge one for myself and a lot of people that I know,
Hmm.
for sure.
Yeah. I mean, that's kind of it's hard. It's hard because I mean, we step into that fear. It's like the hero's journey. Like the moment that one steps, in front of the dragon. It's life wakes up, and there's more activity, and that's a spiritual process. And it's vulnerable when you stand in front of the dragon and something bad might happen. But um, I think we continue to have this opportunity to keep standing up, and being available. So
Yeah. Yeah, awesome.
I guess, yeah, that's kind of I want to do that more, yeah, I want to, I want to experience as much out of this life as I can because it's pretty short. The one thing that we absolutely know is we all don't make it. Our clocks are limited. Every moment is precious. So, and especially those with other people.
Absolutely. Yeah, yeah, beautiful, beautiful, man. Well, I just wanted to check in. Was there anything else that you wanted to
I think
anything else
that's
on
pretty
your mind?
much it. I think I just covered everything probably pretty poorly in the beginning. With trying to explain the four quadrants and the states, but basically I just wanted to say that the four quadrants were useful. This seeing that there are multiple states was useful to me, understanding that it's not dualistic concept of enlightened and non-enlightened. Explaining how drugs can, get somebody into a higher state immediately, but how it's fleeting, and that how it can be destabilizing is another thing. Dangers of drugs. And then lastly, Wilbur, as like a theoretical model. Is it a religion? How should it be used? And how the integral theory is, to me, it's like a protocol, a tool that can be used to, talk with other people or, interpret one's own experiences or whatever. And to sort of the dangers of sort of using a theoretical model as reality itself. That's about it, you know. I think that's pretty much everything.
Awesome, awesome. And I also want to say I appreciated your presentation of some of the nuts and bolts of integral theory and some of the fundamentals. I think there's always a value in going back just to rehash some of the fundamentals that I assume all of the viewers watching this video already know. And even if they do, I still think it's immensely valuable to go over and just present it again. And there's always some new insight or some new way of looking at it that I didn't see before. And everyone has a very unique interpretation and explanation of these things. And yours was a little different than mine, but I still got it from a completely new angle that I would have never thought of on my own. So
Cool.
yeah, thank you. I really appreciate that.
Yeah, I appreciate you taking the time to talk with me, and I also, it's nice to hear, you know, it's nice to get to actually talk with somebody else about these subjects, because I mean, none of my friends know what any of this stuff is, you know. I'm sure it's probably the same with you, you know.
Yeah.
Or maybe you have a couple friends that understand it or whatever. But either way, it's kind of nice, you know, talking with somebody else about it. So I appreciate you taking the time to talk with me. Thank you, Ryan.
Oh, my pleasure. My pleasure. Thank you. And yeah, thanks so much for doing this. And I look forward to talking more with you off air.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. Thanks a lot, Max.
All right. You're welcome. Thank you.